Welcome to the Climate Diplomacy Podcast, a podcast from the Berlin-based Think and Do tank Adelphi, bringing you the latest insights and debates in international climate diplomacy and security. We are your hosts, Raquel Monayer.
And I'm Alexandra Steinkraus. In this series, you will hear from experts and practitioners offering their take on climate foreign policy, climate-related impacts to security, and promoting peace and resilience in a changing climate. For more information, please visit climate-diplomacy.org or follow @ClimateDiplo on Twitter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 40th episode of the Climate Diplomacy Podcast. Today, we will be speaking to Grazia Pacillo. She's a senior scientist and co-lead at the CGIAR, focusing on climate security, but also focusing on climate change, food security, and agriculture at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. Welcome, Grazia.
Hi, everybody.
You're wearing a few hats there, and I know for a fact that you wear a few more because we here at Adelphi are always happy to consult on your expertise in many of our research projects. So, for example, by joining our workshops or our community of experts like recently. So great to have you in this platform as well.
And I certainly agree with that. This could easily turn into an episode where we can talk for way too long of a time. So there's so many things that Grazia could be speaking on, but to keep things focused, today she'll be introducing a pioneering approach called climate smart villages. And this combines innovative research, local knowledge, and global partnerships to promote climate smart agriculture and resilience building practices in rural communities. But before we get to the actual approach, Grazia, can you start us off by running us through some of the work that CGIAR and CGIAR Focus Climate Security does?
Yes, of course. Thanks a lot, Alexandra and Raquel. Thanks a lot for having me here. I'm really excited. Indeed, really exciting. So CGIAR, for those who don't know, CGIAR is the biggest consortium of agriculture research organizations with 13 international research institutes, more than 10,000 researchers, 3,000 partners across 100 countries, etc. So we are big. We are one of the biggest consortia, if not the biggest, as I said. Our ambition at CGIAR is to transform food, land, and water systems in a changing climate by 2030. Specifically, the CGIAR Focus Climate Security team that I co-lead together with Peter Laderek sits under the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT Research Institute and precisely under the Climate Action Lever research area. So we do a lot of climate action. And our ambition is to link climate action with the aspects of the climate security nexus. We are a team of about 70 researchers working across more than 50 countries. Our ambition is to transform climate adaptation into an instrument for stability and peace. And for that, we have a highly multidisciplinary team with most of our colleagues coming from the migration, displacement, peace, and conflict communities, which is really unique in the context of CGIAR, where traditionally we have people with skills on agriculture, climate, socioeconomic skills, etc., but we've never really had a team really reflecting on implication on our work for peace and conflict and vice versa.
Nice, that's really exciting. And still, before we go a little bit more in depth with our topic today, we love a nexus here on the Climate Diplomacy Podcast.
We do.
And also within the climate security field in general. So to help kind of frame our discussion today, can you talk us through a bit of the importance of operationalizing the humanitarian-development-peace nexus? And here too, I mean, you've mentioned global partnerships already, but the need for these partnerships with donors, communities, and other organizations.
Thanks a lot, Alexandra. Yes, I'm really passionate about the humanitarian development peace nexus. And I really think that operationalizing this nexus is crucial for addressing our polycrisis era. We live in a moment where there are many interconnected challenges, humanitarian crisis, development needs, peace building efforts, etc. This approach aims to really create synergies between these three domains, the HD and the P, to achieve sustainable and inclusive outcomes. And in my mind, there are four main reasons why it is really important for us to invest efforts, time, money, funds to try and operationalize this nexus in conflict, fragile, and displacement settings specifically. The first is that the HDP nexus, if done properly, it really allows for integrated responses to complex crises. Many crises are multifaceted, involving elements of conflict, poverty, humanitarian emergencies, and so on. And an integrated HDP approach ensures that responses address the root causes and in the interconnected nature of these issues rather than treating them in isolations. Coordinated efforts that can come from the NHDP approach can also lead to more efficient use of the resources, reducing duplication, like we know exists everywhere, of efforts, and it's also ensuring that aid reaches those that are most in need in a timely manner. The second point is that we need to really think of building sustainable resilience, of what we call the climate resilient peace. By linking humanitarian relief with long-term development goals, communities can build sustainable resilience against future shocks, reducing their vulnerability, but also whilst contributing to keep peace and stability. And on the other side, integrated peace building into humanitarian and development efforts helps address the underlying causes of conflict, fostering stability, and preventing the relapse of violence in many of these contexts. The third point that I would like to make is that the HDP nexus also is critically important for enhancing local capacities, which is linked, of course, with sustainability. So engaging local actors in building their capacities ensures that interventions are contextually appropriate and sustainable. Local ownership is key for the HDP nexus. And local knowledge and practice can also provide innovative solutions and adapt to the different and changing circumstances more swiftly than external actors and other approaches. And then lastly, the HDP nexus is really critical for encouraging proactive measures to prevent crises rather than merely reacting to them. This includes early warning systems, conflict prevention strategies, resilience building activities, and so on and so forth. So it really promotes adaptive strategies that can evolve with changing contexts and new challenges, ensuring continued relevance and effectiveness. But of course, we cannot really do this alone. The only way that the nexus can succeed is via the integration of the three letters, the H, the B, and the D. It is crucial for humanitarian access, such as UN organizations, for instance, to team up with development actors such as the CGIAR and with peace-building organizations to achieve the full potential of our respective ambitions. And without such a structure, none of our goals will be met. There is no peace without resilience and vice versa. I think that is very clear to everybody now.
Thank you. I resonated to so many things you just said. And one that I like a lot is climate resilient peace, because it just says a lot, right? It's a term that kind of explains everything that we mean with the work we do, with whether it's in analysis, research, implementation, in every sense. So I like that a lot. And I guess you will probably get more into that a few times throughout this episode, especially now as we look into the project, what we're here for, to speak about the Climate Smart Village project, Climate Smart Village Plus project, to be more accurate. So maybe you can give a quick introduction to this project. And also another thing besides Nexus that we like a lot is also pathways. Our listeners will know we talk a lot about pathways as well. So for us, it would be interesting to know, so through which pathways does climate smart agriculture or the climate smart villages contribute to peace?
Thanks a lot, Raquel. And just to clarify, the climate resilient peace is a concept that we at CGIAR, we have not invented. There's a few papers out there that we can suggest to have a look at it, but we definitely believe in the motivation behind it, in the rationale of this concept, which is very powerful. So yeah, totally agree with you. All right, so the CSV's project, CSV Plus approach. The main rationale behind the climate smart village approach is that climate is exacerbating root causes of fragility, forced displacement, migration, conflict, and through its significant impact on food, land, and water systems. So many pathways can be really identified through this channel. But fragility, conflict, and on the other hand, they can also undermine climate resilience efforts by increasing vulnerabilities and exposure to different hazards. These forces the most vulnerable and marginalized into a vicious circle of risks, vulnerability, and insecurities. But food, land, and water systems are central in all the different pathways that we can identify in this circle, as they are directly affected by climate shocks and stresses, but also can offer solutions. It follows that adjusting climate adaptation and mitigation interventions in the food, land, and water systems to counteract these compound and reinforcing risks could perhaps contribute to overall peace and stability and help build resilience in emergency, displacement, fragile, and conflict-affected settings. The CGIAR Climate Smart Village approach is not the actual CSV without the plus. It's not new. It was actually launched in 2011 by the CGIAR Research Program on Climate Change, Agriculture, and Food Security. It was a pioneering approach that combines innovative research, local knowledge, and global partnerships to promote climate smart agriculture and resilience building practices in rural communities. Drawing from the expertise of a global network of scientists and practitioners from CGIAR and partners, the approach has successfully implemented a range of context-specific technologies, innovations, practices, and policies in various regions worldwide, from West Africa, East Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, showcasing really the potential of the climate smart villages to address the challenges posed by climate change, to enhance food security and promote sustainable development. Over the years, the CSVs have demonstrated their remarkable capacity to improve agriculture productivity, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and empower local communities to adapt to the changing climate, becoming a model for rural transformation and resilience. So really building on over a decade of success of the CSV now with the plus approach aims to scale out and up the CSV approach by aligning climate adaptation and mitigation to social cohesion and trust building in different settings, displacement, fragile, conflict-affected settings. And the goal of the CSV Plus is really to develop a peace, positive, resilient community that can effectively adapt to climate change impacts while at the same time fostering social cohesion and overall human security.
Thank you. And that all ties up to the local ownership you said, right?
Indeed.
I like that very much. And how would the CSV Plus work then? And where would you be planning to implement it?
So the intersection of the traditional climate smart village approach with the human security is of paramount importance, as climate change has far-reaching implications for the socioeconomic stability, the potential to exacerbate existing tension of the natural resources, but none of this can be done without the local knowledge, the local expertise, the local needs, the participation of the affected communities. So the CSVs, the traditional and the plus approach, is really based on a highly participatory and inclusive approach that really makes them an ideal vehicle to embed elements of conflict sensitivity and peace responsiveness in climate action building on local knowledge. The CSV can really be used to promote positive peace and reduce structural violence by fostering inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development within communities, can improve cooperation and natural resource management, and address the root causes of communal conflict. Also, by ensuring that marginalized groups, including women, youth, and ethnic minorities, have access to resources, technologies, and also decision-making processes, the CSV Plus can help dismantle the systemic barriers there that perpetuate social inequalities and exclusion, often in climate action. So following the traditional CSV model, the CSV Plus approach will combine state-of-the-art land, water, and food system science and innovation with a participatory co-design process. It will co-define peace-positive climate adaptation and mitigation pathways that respond to local needs in a socially inclusive way. And by building on a scientific research base, the researchers will work directly with local community for a period of at least 5 years to assess vulnerabilities, exposure, and compound risks and explore co-design the CSV plus together with the affected communities. It will also share knowledge and disseminate learning across different villages to create cross-learning and knowledge sharing. But they will also, more importantly, test and assess continuously the impact of the co-designed solution on the ground to adapt them to the changing needs for a changing climate crisis. So while the focus will be on the livelihoods tied to full land and water systems, other aspects of the village life, including energy, waste management, social equality, inclusion, cohesion, infrastructure, local governance, you name it, will also play important roles. And this process is inherently, I would like to highlight that, participatory and driven directly by the local communities. So potential solutions that could come into this process as designed by the local communities could be, for instance, transformative changes in agriculture and water management practices to produce co-benefit for stability and peace, changes in natural resource access and management practices that can ease competition, climate-smart technologies, information and agro-advisory services that could strengthen rural livelihood and reduce the risk of forced displacement, or innovative approaches to address structural inequalities and vulnerability of the most marginalized and therefore reduce local tensions. These solutions will be part of an integrated whole of community plan that seeks to foster deep-reaching village transformation. The focus is on the development of solutions that are locally driven and that can be replicated and upscaled by other local communities in the region through strategic partnership with NGO, governments, and then the private sector. So we are in the process of submitting a Green Climate Fund concept note, which proposes to implement CSV in 2 countries in West Central Africa. But our ambitions are much wider than this. Our ambition is to create CSV villages across all the climate security hotspots in the MENA region, across the rest of Africa, in Southeast Asia, in Central America, Latin America, and so on, you name it. So we are looking for like-minded and interested donors to support and join us in this great ambition.
I want to talk about kind of this evidence component soon, but quickly for some of our listeners who maybe aren't working directly in this field, could you quickly define what peace positive means, especially within this project? I think that's a term we hear so much, but don't often kind of take a moment to think about what does this actually mean within these different projects, programs, initiatives.
Thanks, Alexandra. So in decades of implementing climate adaptation, I think it is clear to everybody that not all the climate adaptation or mitigation interventions have actually achieved the right outcome, right? So episodes of maladaptation and what they call also divergent adaptation are evident. Sometimes adaptation happens for the benefit of one group, but at the expense of others. We want to avoid that. So the very least that we can do is to actually do not harm. So we do definitely adhere to that principle, but we want to go a step ahead. We want to implement interventions that are actually able to produce co-benefits for multiple dimensions of human security, and in this case, peace and stability. As I said before, peace cannot last without resilience to climate impacts. Climate crisis is accelerating and exacerbating these drivers of conflict and fragility, but also the other way around is true. Conflict is exacerbating those vulnerabilities that may make people less resilient to climate. So if we as CGIAR, in our ambition to food security, to end hunger, to resilience, etc., if we're serious about these ambitions and these SDG, then we need to implement our action, in this case climate action, in a way that produces co-benefits for peace, for stability. We need to make sure that climate action becomes really an instrument for conflict prevention and for peace and stability, in the words of the Secretary General, UN Secretary General as well.
Thanks so much for adding that. I think also, as you highlighted, the need for sustainability within projects, that of course is related to not only the sustainability in this climate sense, but also making sure that communities are resilient and projects can Yeah, keep going. And of course, one of the reasons kind of these partnerships that we've been discussing and knowledge exchange, including things like this podcast, are so important is that climate security programming is still relatively new. And while there's a lot of initiatives to kind of grow this evidence base, it still is somewhat limited. So I'd be really interested to hear, and I think our audience as well, how do you ensure that climate smart villages plus kind of doesn't go off track?
Yeah, thanks, Alexandra. So the principle of co-design and adaptive management that I mentioned before will be key in the implementation phase. But in addition to this participatory approach and principles, in the past few years, we have developed a series of climate security, what we call the climate security monitoring and assessment tools, quote unquote, to ensure that activities produce the intended results and we don't end up in the maladaptation, divergent maladaptation. We actually produce co-benefits for the overall human security. Specifically, we have two tools that I would like to mention today, which is one is the climate security sensitivity tool, the CSST. This tool is a great and easy tool to assess the peace potential of climate adaptation interventions. It also produces critical recommendation to adjust the intended activities to the desired positive peace processes based on the local risks and needs. This tool essentially compares the ideal climate peace mechanisms to what the different interventions are trying to address and identify gaps in the proposal design or across the entire project cycles and produces recommendation with specific indication of the type of activities that should be implemented. So this tool will be implemented, deployed across the entire project cycle. We intend to use it across regularly and will be highly participatory as well, in that communities will be active participants in the evaluation and adaptation of interventions, in addition to define and redefine, obviously, the needs and the risks. But another tool that we have developed is called the Climate Security Programming Dashboard for Climate Finance, CSPD. You will find both of these tools online. So this tool helps us understand whether further investigations or risk mitigation strategies are needed to effective capture and mitigate conflict or fragility risks. The CSPD is a tool that aims to increase conflict sensitivity of climate funds generally. So it was intended, when it was created, to be deployed and tailored to the IFIs projects. But really, the platform can be useful in producing a clear vision of the compound risk affecting the communities and in identifying safeguard measures and risk mitigating strategies to really mitigate the impact of conflict and fragility on the resilience objective of any interventions in the climate sphere. So yeah, we will use these two tools in addition to all the other M&E, of course, the standard traditional M&E's tools and research pieces.
Actually, this tool, good that you mentioned it. I just saw it 2 days ago in our workshop that we had in our office. We actually did a simulation with this tool and it's so fantastic. I'm not sure whether our listeners have seen it, but we will definitely link it in the description below because you can actually simulate so many things. It's so useful. We will definitely put a link there.
Right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for producing something that is so useful for the wider community, right? And yeah, I think you mentioned a lot about the co-design component of the CSV approach. And now just thinking, aside from communities and the local agricultural experts, which you've mentioned, how would you ensure that also local researchers can contribute to setting up these villages?
Yeah, thanks. So one of the proudest moments really in the history of our team, of the CGIAR focused climate security team, was the conceptualization of what we call the Climate Peace and Displacement Partnership approach, the CPD. So the rationale behind the CPD is that global science on the impact of climate change and its relationship with human mobility and fragility is highly geographically imbalanced. Not only human mobility, the entire climate security community is highly geographically imbalanced, with the majority of the knowledge generated in institutions coming from the north, and those coming from low-income countries having lower visibility of policy impact. So the localization agenda is an opportunity to shift this imbalance. And we, as a CGIAR-focused climate security team, we aim to leverage these partnerships in the regions that are more affected by climate and security risks. So this CPD partnership is really based on the development of locally relevant and demand-driven research and interventions, on creating opportunities for students, early career, as senior researchers, supporting mentorship with and between southern institutions, but also providing direct support to individuals and research centers through small grants, write-ups, etc. In the context of CSV Plus, the Climate Smart Villages Plus, we will ensure that participation of local researchers across the entire process cycle, and we will leverage as much as we can the research produced by local researchers and university, and we will use that to inform the design and implementation of all the activities. So we really hope to leverage these partnerships, southern institutions, southern networks of researchers. We hope to bring all of this together to design and to implement the CSV in the best way possible.
As you've talked about kind of leveraging this research in order to design this actual project, I also want to look a bit more to the future as we wrap up this episode. So it sounds like the CSV will really produce a wealth of information that could not only help the project internally, but can also help future CPS programming or climate peace and security programming. So one of my favorite topics, but kind of knowledge sharing. How are you planning to share this useful information in the future so that others can also benefit from these experiences, lessons, recommendations, and research?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. Indeed, we do expect to generate an unprecedented amount of learning and knowledge and research pieces, etc., which could be extremely useful for ourselves as we move forward with this agenda, but also we hope that will be useful for other HDP actors and practitioners as well as policymakers. So we expect that all the evidence produced will be featured, as we do for all of our research at the CGIAR Focused Climate Security, on our CGIAR Climate Security Observatory. The CSO is available online. It's a public available tool at the cso.cgir.org. It's a decision support platform that aims to help researchers, but specifically policymakers, with the targeting, programming, prioritization of climate investments in climate security hotspots. More specifically, the CSO provides evidence on sort of the broader spectrum on the climate security nexus. So we aim to, we say, qualify and quantify, quote unquote, the nexus by providing research and findings on how is climate exacerbating root causes of conflict, fragility, and displacement. So a lot of those pathways that Raquel mentioned before across multiple countries, more than 20 countries, with the global coverage, etc. Where is this happening? So lots of hotspots analysis, etc. For whom, vulnerability profiles, but it also provides guidance and tools on what to do to mitigate the vicious circle of climate and conflict. So the CSV Plus will sort of feature under the latter component. So the what questions, what can we do? It was launched in Geneva, New York, in collaboration with UNCPR, the Geneva Center for Security Policy, UNHCR, IGAD, CAEP, UN Security Council, the CSM, etc. And at the moment, it covers about more than 20 countries across Africa, Latin America, Latin and Central America, and Southeast Asia. And it presents the state-of-the-art evidence on the climate security nexus that we have carried out in the past years using an integrated mixed method approach, what we call the integrated climate security framework, that really tries to address the complexities of this nexus. So the CSO will provide real-time updates on what we learn from the communities of the CSV Plus. So I guess watch this space for more information on the CSV journey at cso.cgr.org. So one example of this fantastic partnership is the one that we are trying to set up with the UNHCR. We're working very closely with them and providing our climate science to help UNHCR defining the global strategy and regional strategy in many countries in the world. And we think that this is quite an important milestone in the implementation and operationalization of the HDP Nexus. We've recently signed MOU with them with the great event here in Rome, but we're really looking forward to take this to the next step, to the next level as we move ahead with this ambition.
Thank you so much, Grazia. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Raquel and Alexandra, for inviting me to be part of your fantastic podcast. It's been a true pleasure discussing with you these important topics and appreciated the opportunity to contribute to this meaningful conversation, and look forward to future discussions. So thank you again.
Today, Grazia spoke about the CGIAR Climate Smart Villages approach, which links innovative research, local knowledge, and global partnerships to promote climate smart agriculture and resilience building practices in rural communities. And since 2011, the CSVs have demonstrated a remarkable capacity to improve agricultural productivity, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, empower local communities to adapt to a changing climate, and become a model for rural transformation and resilience. So building on over a decade of successes of the CSVs, CSV Plus approach now aims to scale out and up the CSV approach by aligning climate adaptation and mitigation, social cohesion, and trust building in displacement, fragile, and conflict-affected settings. All of this with the goal to develop a peace-positive, resilient community that can effectively adapt to the climate change impacts while fostering social cohesion and human security. So quite a tall order, wishing lots of luck and success with all of this. And of course, all of this done with strong partnerships with UN agencies, with development organizations, researchers, and so on and so forth. So lots of success to the CSV Plus project.
And this was the Climate Diplomacy Podcast. We'll be back with another episode in a few weeks, and you can follow our latest updates on Twitter at Climate Diplo and also on LinkedIn, Climate Diplomacy and Security. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.